Dr. Andrew Grecki here, and I hear this all the time. I don't have time for another program, right? Does that sound familiar? And I want to be honest. I don't think it's really about time. When a practice owner or director says I don't have time, what they're what they're usually saying is I don't have the bandwidth for another thing that doesn't work out, right? They've had bad past experiences with something they've tried to implement, or they're already at capacity, right? I can't absorb another failure. I think that's the thing, and that's a completely reasonable place to be, but it's a very strong self-limiting belief. So instead of telling you that RTM easy and doesn't take long, which is what every vendor that's out there is going to tell you, let me actually walk you through what the time commitment looks like, so you can maybe reframe this in your mind. Um, so you can maybe decide for yourself instead of letting your past experiences or other people shape your thought process. So let's talk about what the actual time investment looks like, and I want to be specific, right? So here's what getting RTM running actually looks like in terms of time. um, there's the initial setup, right? And I do this, by the way. This is part of my contribution to the company. I work with onboarding and setting up companies, and so that's about roughly 2 to 3 hours of your time spent over 2 weeks. You're reviewing protocols, you're completing credentialing paperwork, you're walking through the platforms so you understand. Then there's staff training, and that's also another 2 to 3 hours for your clinical team. That's it. Most practices do it in a single afternoon. And so the ongoing time for practice owners is very minimal. You're not running the day-to-day thing, right? Our team is handling the monitoring for you if that's what you've chosen, the pathway you've chosen. But you're going to receive regular reports. You can review anything that's flagged as clinically significant. But the ongoing time for your PTs, I would say, is essentially zero added time, because their job is to see the patients and load up their home exercise programs in the app at the end of the session, and that's normal. That's what they're already doing, and that takes what, 3 to 5 minutes per patient. And so some PTs say it actually saves them time, because patients that come back with better recall of their exercises have fewer questions, right, or fewer corrections on how to perform the movement. And so that actually allows the therapist to do more what they're doing, which is teaching new things. So that's it. That's the actual time commitment, not days, not weeks of onboarding, not months. It's not like an EMR change, right? That can take 6 to 8 weeks and last for months of ongoing disruption. This is not that. And I'm not going to say it's no time, right? But it's not a big deal. And so let me share what I actually think is happening when practice owners say they don't have time. You know, you're already stretched. I get that. Your schedule's full, your staff is stretched, your admin load is heavy. I get it. I'm a practice owner myself. And the idea of taking on something new, even something good, I know that feels like added weight to a bar that's already maxed out. And you've been pitched things before. I get that. So have I. Um, Things that promised to be simple and turned out, not to be, like an EMR switch. Things that required more of your attention than advertised. Maybe you switched to a billing company. Things that created problems that they were supposed to solve. I know that's what our last EMR transition was like. So I don't have time is actually, in my opinion, I don't have the capacity to absorb another disappointment. And I can totally respect that deeply. I really do. But um, this is not that, which is why I want to be very direct. If RTM required weeks of your time, significant staff retraining, and major process changes, I would be honest and tell you that. I wouldn't pitch you a program that would overwhelm you, right? And if I would just tell you the truth, right? And so our model is specifically built for the practice owner who is already at capacity, right? The monitoring is off your plate if you want it to be. The documentation is off your plate. Our system handles all that. The patient follow-ups is off your plate if you want us to handle that for you. You add a layer of clinical care and a revenue stream, and your team's workload either stays the same or actually gets slightly better, easier, because patients are doing better. They're better prepared for their sessions. They're doing their home program at home. They're getting better outcomes. And all that stuff is really powerful, right? And you're already doing this work anyways. Your staff's already making home programs. They just need to use a software that tracks the RTM time and logs all the documentation and is compliant. Here's maybe a comparison worth making. If you add dry needling to your practice, right, that's a months of continuing education, training, credentialing. Now you got to buy equipment. There's schedule changes, and you got to make the appointment. You got to make the charge in your EMR. Adding a cash pay wellness program. By the way, I've done all these. You got to develop the offer. You got to make marketing. You got to change your front desk workflows. Adding RTM with MovementRX it's 2 weeks setup and a few hours of staff training. That's it. You know, it ongoing work handled by our team. That's the key. And I'm not saying RTM is right for every practice, but those other things aren't, right? I'm saying when you compare the actual time investment, RTM is on the lower end of the range, right? I've done the dry needling, the equipment, the training. I've done the laser. I've done the workflow changes and the EMR changes. The question isn't really whether you have time. It's whether the time you do invest returns meaningful value, right? That's really what you're saying and what you're thinking. And that's important. And the answer is yes. The time that you'll put into this will have an absolute huge impact on the value that it returns. If you've been telling yourself you don't have time, I'd ask you to spend 15 minutes on a call with me. I can show you the visual timeline. I can give you testimonials from others, and we can look at what it would actually take. Not a pitch, just a real walkthrough of time, the time commitment and the value return that you'll have, the workflow, what our team handles versus what your team handles. It's really simple, I'm telling you. And if this still doesn't fit, I'll tell you that. I'd rather you walk away informed than sign up for something that you're not set up to run well, I think is the key. And there's a lot of people that are doing this that haven't been doing it well. And that's really my main goal is I want to do this right. My name is Dr. Andrew Grecki. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I'll see you next time.